So I have to say, that little jingle, that little beat that our boy Gen was dropping when making the batteries, thinking he had a nice easy job, everything was gonna be a-okay, and then he realizes that, well, he actually has to make a shit ton of them, not just a couple of dozen. I don't know why, but that little beat was strangely entertaining, and I'd love to hear a full version of that. I don't know if it's just me, but I found that to be incredibly so ridiculous, so silly, but surprisingly catchy. But I guess it's the simplistic beauty that can always hook you, right? So I guess there's going to be some form of announcement about Dr. Stone, I think next week with the conclusion of the first season. Most likely it's going to be confirming a second season, at least that's what most people assume. But I guess in before it's going to be a stage play and we get Senku on the live action stage. I could see them pulling that just to rub salt into the wounds of the anime fandom. But still, I totally expect we're going to get some form of confirmation about a second season. Maybe even a date, who knows, I guess only time will tell. But with this week's episode, episode 23, we kind of went back to the roots of Dr. Stone, I have to say. The intro to the anime for a good while was a lot of just building tech and just kind of advancing humanity, but the difference between back then and now is that with this system that we currently have, there's tons of people, tons of equipment. It basically has a laboratory, right? There's no real way to compare it to the intro, but at the same time you can, because it's a very familiar feeling. Going back to the roots of Dr. Stone, a bunch of tech, a bunch of this is what we're doing, this is how we're doing it, and watching characters' minds explode as we have a grin from our main man's face being like, God damn it, we're actually doing this, we're actually progressing humanity, except now he's probably believing that he could actually reach space given enough time. I love that classic feeling because I don't expect that this war is going to be over with episode 24. I totally expect them to basically butt heads. You know, we'll see Tsukasa, we'll see Senku, they'll stare each other down and then the credits will roll. We'll probably get a confirmation for season 2, something like that. But still, it was nice to see at the very least we got to the point that we built a cellular device. Obviously, it's not going to be a smartphone. It's not going to be something that you can fit in just your pocket, but still, what they were able to achieve by the end of this episode, it felt like it was a struggle, it felt like it was rewarding, but also it felt like it could totally happen, which is kind of the core thing that Dr. Stone's been built off of ever since day one. This could happen. Remove the petrification and the whole idea that Senku counted the days for thousands of years. Remove that, all of the steps and the scientific angles that they go through, in theory, all of this should work given what they were doing and how they're doing it with the roadmaps and basically how they've kind of explained everything up to this point. And I just love seeing all of the different characters kind of actually work hand in hand with each other. There's a lot of like really emotional and sweet moments from Chrome to the old man, just hell, even Suika and the kids, like pretty much all the characters you would want to see have that little bonding moment, that little sweet moment that you just let out, aw, isn't that cute or isn't that sweet? You kind of get that in this episode, and even having the former village chief say, I made the right call, you absolutely were the man for the job and I didn't mess up. And I found that to be like the perfect way to tie this episode together, where you just have so much creativity, so much advancing of tech. You're trying to make the vacuum tube, you're trying to basically crack the hardest minerals in existence, make it into powder, then make it into toothpaste, heat it up, basically make everything that you need to. And you figure they can do that. So what would be the surprise element in this episode? Something that would be like, oh, we weren't expecting this, so it actually makes it feel like another unique and really fulfilling episode of Dr. Stone. And that's where all of the character moments come into play. You get so many cute and just hilarious scenes throughout this episode, and you know, characters are taking notice that people like Magma, someone who would never jump to say, hey, I'm going to help you. Clearly, he's not doing it the way it was intended, but still, people are taking notice that everyone is helping. Everyone is trying to aid in this man's quest, and that's why he gets complimented for, you know, saying, hey, I made you village chief, and I don't regret this in the slightest. Tons of stuff that's probably going to make you laugh, but it's the moments where you have characters like Senku saying, hey, this is what I'm gonna do, you guys need to figure this out. And Chrome has to rise to the occasion, figure out how the hell are they going to heat something without melting the glass. And I love how he just puts his trust in him, that you can do it, I don't need to help you, and he rises to the occasion. That alone would have been enough for me to be like, okay, that's the extra element to make this episode feel unique and make it feel like it stands tall as a very original Dr. Stone episode. But then you get all the amazing stuff with the old man being like, you know, he feels lonely, and obviously, I mean, this man's like 50 years older than pretty much everyone he's working with. It's clear why he would feel like he's the outsider, why he would feel like, you know, he doesn't belong, he can't actually be friends with these guys, because who wants to be friends with an old man? And the dude starts crying because they've always viewed him as a friend. Like, what are you talking about? You have two science buddies right here. And I found that type of stuff to be just incredibly emotionally gripping. Some people might want to call it cheesy, some people might want to call it oh, it's just, classic anime trying to pull on your heartstrings, but it isn't to me, because it's something that we built up to. In the intro, he was just the crazy old man that they drug by a rope, but now he's actually a part of the crew. He feels like a mentor. He feels like a best friend in a lot of ways to these characters. And it was nice to see how, yes, they transitioned to obvious comedy, but still, those are the moments that feel rewarding for all the time we spent with these characters up to this point. And then having the kids feel like, they want to do something too, and give them something they can do. Give them something that makes them feel like they're helpful. They actually are helpful, just obviously not to the same degree as someone like Chrome or the old man, for sure. But just once again seeing Senku do something that he didn't have to. It's something that shows his compassionate side of like, people are actually pretty terrified of the winter, and obviously so. We don't really have to worry about that if you live in a modern country because, the idea of freezing outside, unless you're homeless, you wouldn't have to deal with that horror, the dangerous parts of Mother Nature. You can sit inside during a storm, but for them, their homes could get blown away. The idea of freezing to death is a very real chance. So the fact that he builds them basically an indoor furnace that they can cook their food and work in peace, and he does that for everyone, and you see all the different chimney smokes coming away. Like, it's so refreshing because Senku bounces between that mad scientist. There's a couple of good faces in this episode that makes, once again, him look like the villain. And he's doing everything for the progression of science. He wants to keep rebuilding humanity to the point that he can go back to space, but every step of the way, he makes people's lives better in the process. And that's what makes him one of my favorite characters of this past year, is that Senku doesn't fit the mold that a lot of like shonen design characters would be. In most series, like a Dr. Stone, if you were to try to give this to another author, I feel like Senku would just be this like either mad scientist and stay as a mad scientist who just uses, abuses, he's the brain from Pinky and the Brain. Or he would just be super compassionate and never show any flaws or any inconsistencies. But Senku is a very human character, and I feel like a lot of times when you have that intelligent character, it's written in a way that you can't relate to him. And relatability is something that I feel like gets abused in anime, like, oh, you're just trying to relate to the viewer and it ignores faulty writing. But here, you relate to him not because a majority of us are going to feel like we're as intelligent as Senku, but rather we understand why he's trying to progress science, and we understand why he may look a little mad at some times, and why he also will do nice things just because he wants them to feel comfortable as they start progressing to their next invention. It's something that really separates the top tier writers from the run-of-the-mill of the manga industry, and I really think this series is excelling, and why I'm going to be shocked if that announcement next week isn't a confirmation for season 2, because everyone loves Dr. Stone. There's so much hype around this series, and it's gotta be insanely profitable at this point that it's not getting greenlit. Like, I mean, come on, it's getting greenlit for sure. I just felt like this episode, it really did feel like that classic. It kind of felt like something that, in a lot of ways, remove the connections these characters have and just look at what they were doing. It feels very familiar to like the first 5 episodes of Dr. Stone, where it is a lot of comedy, a lot of silliness, but a lot of advancing technology and humanity in the process. The difference is now that we have a village, we have so many people backing him. In a lot of ways, we're concluding the first season by going back to the roots of what made this series great in the beginning. What hooked so many to keep watching him to get to a point where he had a civilization behind him. And it's kind of insane to end this episode feeling like, holy shit, not only do they now have a device that most likely will give them the edge in this war, but what will happen? Because it's not like it's just going to be Senku who has, a little trick up his sleeve. Tsukasa obviously is going to have something as well, but what is that going to look like? Are they going to lose their homes? Are they going to lose people in the process? Like, there's a lot of things that could happen. Will something interfere? Will the war get postponed or completely shut down because of an external force? You don't know exactly where this is going to go unless obviously you read the manga. And that's what's really interesting right now, is that it feels like classic Dr. Stone, but also something that we can't totally predict, and it's going to go in a completely unique direction. And I imagine when we get a season 2, that's where we're going to see the punchline of whatever's going to happen. It just feels as if all the characters' personalities, they really had a moment to shine in this episode. At least all the focal characters that we've had to experience up to this point. Obviously, there's a lot of side characters, or just, smaller characters that maybe we saw them a couple of times throughout the episode, but they didn't get a prominent role. But all the main characters, you got Suiki, you got Gen, you got Chrome, you got pretty much everyone that you would want to see get a moment to shine in this episode. I kind of felt like they had a line or they had a moment to just make you laugh, and this was a hilarious episode. In fact, it had some of the most memorable comedy over the past few weeks for me. I really thought it went back to its roots, and that's not a bad thing. The only time going back to your roots is a negative thing is when an author or an anime or whatever it is, basically they've ran out of ideas. So they just keep pulling from the same thing they've done before that seemingly worked, and they just keep rehashing the same thing over and over again. But for an episode like this, the style that it went for, it was good to kind of go back to those roots, really show us something that we're familiar with while also doing something we're not familiar with. Like, they were doing some crazy things to build this communication device. So the mixture of new meets old is something that feels so goddamn refreshing, but also familiar all in the process. And I think that's once again something that Dr. Stone does and does exceptionally well that not many series can compete with, and I wouldn't be surprised if we see a lot of anime, a lot of manga, light novels in the future start taking note of what Dr. Stone is doing with educational, kind of hilarious banter and insane, exhilarating action, and doing something that's either going to completely rip it off or doing something that's inspired by it, because Dr. Stone is a goddamn exceptional series, and I can't wait to see more. But what do you feel? Let me know down in the comment section below, and if you enjoyed this video, be sure to drop a like, and remember to hit that subscribe button if you happen to be new. So until next time, everyone, please take care and have a good one.